A short while earlier with noted military strategist and historian Tom Cooper. And joining us for more on this and what we can expect in coming days, we have Tom Cooper, who's one of the world's leading military strategists. Thank you so much for speaking to us here at Times Now, Mr. Cooper. With the U.S. launching strikes on Iranian nuclear site, what's your assessment as far as implications are concerned? Do you see this as a major turning point in curbing Iran's nuclear ambitions?
Thank you very much for inviting me, and nice to be with you today. As for whether this is a turning point, of course it is a major affair. It is a big affair. When the United States decide to invade a country or to attack a country, bomb a country, it is a major affair. No doubt about this. However, in regards of Iranian nuclear program, that's not going to work. If for no other reason, because all the indications available right now are showing that, or at least indicating that Iran has evacuated, for example, the Fordo nuclear facility in the last 2 or 3 days, if not already earlier. That means has removed all the enriched uranium it has already had. It has removed probably the majority of centrifuges out of it. And that's it. The facility was empty, and as of yesterday, they started piling gravel and earth atop of entrances into the facility.
Mm-hmm. So you're
and they wouldn't do that if there was anything.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Are you referring to those satellite images which have come out, which show the kind of movement of trucks and other logistics that was taking place? Yes. Are you going by that primarily to base this argument?
Yes, exactly. That plus. Okay, I've got some clues in this regards from Iran, from inside Iran. But I said, again, they wouldn't do that if there was anything useful still inside the facility. So whatever was now hit there, whether the GBU-57s managed to penetrate or not, is de facto irrelevant because nothing useful was inside the facility anymore. And this means, I mean, principal things Iran needs in order to continue enriching uranium centrifuges and enrich, available enriched uranium, and it has retained both of these, so the program goes on just somewhere else. Okay. And now super secret probably.
Right. Also, Mr. Cooper, you've mentioned that it's not really surprising that there isn't much visible damage at Fordo. You also referred to the GBU-57s that are designed to penetrate deep underground before detonating. Now, in your assessment, how can we gauge the actual impact of such strikes at the surface level in terms of those particular locations? Because there are questions about what's there on the surface. In fact, there are some images that actually show the place where the bunker busters would have perhaps penetrated the ground. How are you looking at this?
It is similar like during Indian strikes on Pakistani underground nuclear facilities. The weapon flies into the ground and detonates 20, 30, 50, in the case of GBU-57, which the Americans have deployed against Fordo, even more meters under the ground. So you don't see the detonation itself. At most you see a plume of dust rising from the first hit, but what has happened underneath, you don't know. And contrary to what we usually see in different Hollywood movies and so on, there's no orange, oily explosion or some kind of flash visible, but it is, everything is happening under the ground,
right,
and deep under the ground. So therefore, what you can see at most, if the bombs have penetrated the facility under the ground, would be a crater, which means that the soil has moved down. And we have seen this, for example, after the Indian strike on, oh gosh, which air base was that in Pakistan? Not the other one, sorry, not Nuke, but
there were at least 8 others. So
there was, for example, you could see this on Kirana Hills. You could see it on another. Just the name is escaping me right now, but It was excellently covered by Indian media in particular, because you could see that the soil has you have the crater like this. Why? Because the facility underneath, deep under the ground, has collapsed. The ceiling of that facility has collapsed, and therefore the soil at the top of it is collapsing as well.
Okay. Very interesting. Because, one of the other things that perhaps would go on to prove what you're saying is a statement of the IAEA, and even Iran has confirmed that there hasn't been any contamination after the strikes, because there was a lot of fear about whether there could be radioactive leakage, if the B2 bombs, B2 was used to actually, put these bombs down. Do you think that that is a further proof that in terms of the nuclear material, the enriched uranium itself, it has perhaps been moved?
Obviously, yes. I mean, as far as I know, only in Esfahan, where the facility was above the ground, just a normal building de facto. There was some contamination inside the building itself, but nothing else. So yes, this is a confirmation for probable evacuation of Iranian nuclear materials out of these facilities, which is a normal procedure. Everybody would do the same, especially when given so much time. We should not forget, Israel has claimed, for example, it has destroyed Natanz facility already 1 week ago, right at the start of the attack. Why do the Americans then need to go and bomb it again the last evening? Then Esfahan, Israel has flown at least 2 strikes on this facility so far. Why do the Americans need to fire 30 cruise missiles at it? So obviously Israeli airstrikes are not as effective as expected or whatever, and the Americans had to finish the job. Right. Why do they have to finish the job? In order to physically destroy the facilities. Does the destruction of physical destruction of the facilities means automatic destruction of nuclear materials inside? No, because if they were moved out, and this is probably the case, or most likely the case, then you have destroyed the facilities, but not the nuclear materials, and that's it.
But does it set back the program a bit by, say, a few months or years, perhaps?
No. Of course, because Iranians now need to reorganize the entire project. This is foremost a logistical issue, and then the construction issue is to find a new site somewhere even deeper under the ground, to organize all of this even more secretly. So far, they were actually not secret, but very transparent, because they were cooperating with the International Atomic Organization all the time and were regularly inspected by its inspectors. But now they are probably going to leave even the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And then, of course, everything is super secret and nobody knows what exactly is going on nowhere.
Right. Also, I wanted to ask you, strategically speaking, the message that is also being sent out. One is, of course, the requirement of the U.S. military hardware in terms of these bunker busters, but flying in these bombers from Missouri, refueling over Kansas, and then deploying them, from other forward areas. At the moment, we don't know. There's, of course, the possibility of Guam, Diego Garcia. There's a lot of speculation around that. What is your information surrounding this? And also, the larger message being sent out, is it deterrence, escalation control, or both?
This is a completely mindless act. This is collapsing the entire rule of the worldwide organization, all the violation of all the possible treaties and conventions that have been signed since 1945, actually since 1941, because it all began with the Atlantic Charter. And shall I remind you that in the Atlantic Charter, U.S. President Roosevelt has de facto forced Winston Churchill to accept a post-war order, worldwide order, along which there will be no colonies, there will be no further aggressive wars, where those launching aggressive wars would be punished, and so on. And so this was the fundament for the creation of the United Nations in 1945, or 44 actually. So now you have United Nations Charter, which says aggressive wars, clearly defines aggressive wars and aggressors, which is essentially what Israel is doing since 1947, even before it was established. And now all these violations of this charter, of the humanitarian treaties and laws, international laws, of Geneva Conventions, all of this is entirely pointless. It goes so far that actually even NATO, existence of NATO is pointless, because U.S. government, U.S. president, is secretly behind the backs of his allies in Europe, negotiating with Putin.
Right. So, and you see this?
All of this is absolutely becoming absolutely pointless. There's a massive gross violation with absolute impunity from Israel, and the United States. Nothing happens. On the contrary, half of the West or most of the West is actually supporting both of them. Everything is fine, and you all the others, you have to accept this or die. That's as simple as that.
Right. And, it's interesting you mentioned Putin because, the Russian condemnation coming in has also said that a number of countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their own nuclear warheads. Because is this now, potentially a sign of a nuclear escalation and a wider conflict that we could see?
Firstly, I know that Putin likes to play the role of Iranian ally, and I know that all the West is damning Russia for being allied with Iran. When one is talking with Iranians, it turns out the situation is absolutely diametrically opposite. The Iranians mistrust the Russians. The Russians are messing up with all the contracts. They have no agreements are valid. They can sign whatever they like. They can agree whatever they like. Nothing works with the Russians when one is Iranian. On the contrary, Russians are prohibiting, for example, passage of Iranian oil exploration and gas exploration ships via the system of rivers inside Russia to the Caspian Sea in order to prohibit Iranian capability to exploit gas and oil from the Caspian Sea area. Just for example. When it comes to Su-35s, Iran has paid for them, Russia didn't deliver. S-300s, Iran has paid for them in advance, Russia is not delivering, or didn't deliver for years. MiG-31s, Iran has paid for them in advance, Russia didn't deliver. So whatever is now in terms of talking about and whatever Putin is stating in this regards, I'm taking this very lightly because it is something for public consumption in Russia and nowhere else.
And what other military options does Iran have at this point of time? There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of chatter that they could have on their radar, perhaps the U.S. bases in the Middle East, the Saudi Arabia that's being spoken about. Do you see this as being something that Iran can potentially do?
Of course, it can't do that. Yes, it has several thousands of relatively short-range, actually tactical missiles, ballistic missiles, which it could deploy with ease against U.S. bases in the Persian Gulf area, which means anywhere from Kuwait via Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Qatar to Oman. The problem is this. Problem on the post office. The Iranians are not really keen to do this. Why? Because they have good agreements and relatively good relations to most of these countries. Okay, there might be disagreements and of the various kind, and they do not really love each other cordially, but they are in good relations. If nothing else, there is even a Chinese negotiated agreement with Saudi Arabia. So why should Iranians ruin all of this? And potentially risk losing Chinese support? Because China is the third, so to say, the third laughing, in the background in this conflict, or the fourth. It's all the time you can follow them on Flight Radar 24 and similar instances. All the time you can follow Chinese transport aircraft landing somewhere in eastern or northern Iran. Ever since Israel has attacked Iran. So they are supplying what they have to supply, that is ammunition and so on, simultaneously evacuating their own citizens out of Iran and so on and so on. The point is this. Iran has capability to do lots of things in conventional sense, in conventional military sense, but well, if nothing else, if I am to ask, it's better going to use asymmetric approach to this. This is a discipline in which the Islamic Revolutionary Guards are excelling. It means create a similar mess like they have created in Iraq after 2003. Help instigate a civil war, and then ruin the American designs for the country, and establish themselves at least in the position of influence, if not in the position of dominance in Baghdad. So they can do the same with Saudi Arabia with ease, because there is a big Shia minority in the Saudi population. They can do this with ease in Bahrain, for example, because most of the population over there are Shia or Shia. They can do this, everywhere. They can instigate so many problems, and that they can do this for decades in advance without any major problems. No matter what, even if Israel now goes on and bombs them for the next 30 years, it's not going to lessen their capability to run clandestine operations behind the Israeli backs. So the question is now, which way is the Iranian leadership going to opt to go? Is it going to go for some kind of conventional military escalation or retaliation at escalation, because Iran cannot escalate this situation. This is alone in Israeli and American hands. Or is it going to go for different ways? If it decides to go for different ways, then we have to wait for at least a few days, if not weeks or months. And then all of a sudden there are going to be things, things are going to happen. And then we are going to see what develops from that. This is beyond my capability to predict.
Tom Cooper, thank you so much for analyzing that and explaining it to our viewers, breaking it all down. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
You're most welcome. Thank you very much my pleasure.
Thank you, sir.